Good evening and welcome everybody to the fifth rendition of our virtual SOF Team Room series. My name is Fran Racioppi. I'm the MC. I'm the host of the Jedburgh podcast, and I have a company that I founded a couple of years ago called FR6, and I'm so honored to be brought back for the second time. So I guess I did something right, at least a little bit in the last time we did this, but really honored to be back here for the second time to host our next SOF Team Room. This is the fifth in our series. It started in November of 2021. When we as a SOF community identified that we needed to have some honest conversations. We'd been involved in the global war on terror for 20 years. We withdrew out of Afghanistan, and we all have our opinions about how that went, but we needed to be able to get together and we needed to talk about it. We needed to have more conversations, and we needed to have honest and true conversations. And over the past year, the team room's been a place for frank and candid conversations with impactful leaders. We've had Lieutenant General Mike Nagata. We've had Lieutenant General Jim Slife, Vice Admiral Tim Szymanski, Sergeant Major Bill Tepford, Tom and Jen Satterley, SEAC Ramon Colon Lopez, Sergeant Major Hank Marsh, and Command Chief Greg Smith. I know he's a regular on here, so if he's listening, good to see you again, Chief Smith. But tonight, we're going to be talking about what it means to build a legacy that continues to lead. We are so fortunate in special operations to have, I believe, some of the absolute greatest leaders on the planet. And people will argue with me, and I'll tell them they're wrong all day long. But it doesn't matter what service you come from. It doesn't matter what era you come from. SOF has created some of the most special leaders and high caliber leaders that have served not only in our military, but continued that service when they've left. And it transcends every single conflict that our country's ever been in. These virtual team rooms are a place for these candid conversations with tough topics. We want you to leave knowing that the community that you're a part of walks this path with you. And we want to give everybody something that they can take away, apply to their life today, tomorrow, whatever it may be, and be a little bit better and a little bit stronger for it and be better as a community. We're going to be here for the next couple of hours. We have a bunch of topics we're going to discuss that are important to ourselves, our family, our community. After the opening keynote, we're going to switch gears and we're going to go into a couple of back-to-back health sprints. So if you haven't been a part of this before, there's going to be a separate Zoom link that will be a little bit further down on the webpage in which you join this on. I'll walk you through it after. So we'll ask you to click on that second Zoom link. You'll go into the health sprints. They'll be back-to-back. The first one is going to be our SOF connection discussion on anchors of meaning led by Preston Klein of the Mission Critical Team Institute. The second one in the health discussion is on cancer and special operations with Rob Newson, Chelsea Simone from the Hunter 7 Foundation, and Julia Sivardi and Amanda Skeen from Soteria Precision Medicine Foundation. Looking forward to both these. That's going to be about an hour. About 8:30, we're going to ask everyone to click back on the original link for the main event page, and that's going to bring everybody together. It's going to have our keynote speakers. It's going to have everyone who is involved in both of the health breakouts, and we're going to have a collective discussion where we're going to roll up all the topics that we discussed tonight. But first, I want to introduce our keynote speakers. I'm absolutely honored to have with us tonight and be in the presence of two of the greatest leaders that special operations has ever seen. They're giants in our community, and it says arguable here, but I'm going to tell you it's not arguable that one of them has been a key player in every major conflict our country has been engaged in since Vietnam. Their commitment and their legacy of service predates the inception of many of our modern SOF units, and they have been instrumental in the direction that U.S. Special Operations Command has taken since its inception. We're all familiar with the first SOF truth. Humans are more important than hardware. It's number one because it's honestly, in my mind, the most important, but it's often tough to bring into practice. It's also possible that few other leaders, possibly no one, has done more to support that SOF truth than our first keynote speaker, Admiral Eric Olson. His leadership led to the creation of the Preservation of the Force and Family and Modern Human Performance and Wellness Resources. He retired as a SOCOM commander in 2011, shortly after the Bin Laden raid. Our second keynote speaker is Command Sergeant Major Tom Corbett, whose service history is a highlight reel of nearly every historic operations we still talk about in all of our small unit classes today. He served with distinction in almost all of our special forces groups, and then he went on to serve 19 years in the Special Mission Unit. He retired, and he continues to lead and shape our units and all of our people in special operations. And just before he started, he was even talking about just getting back from an event at Fort Bragg. So that mission continues every single day. So that keynote panel is going to be led by Dr. Chris Frueh, a huge friend of Global SOF, great friend of mine. We go back a long way. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Chris. You got the mic.
All right. Thank you, Fran. A very wonderful and gracious introduction to us all. My goal over the next 25 minutes or so is to say as little as possible, because I know our audience really, really wants to hear from both of you, as do I. The only editorial type comment I'm going to make is one of the things that I've seen over and over again in my work with the SOF community over the past decade is how much admiration and reverence and respect is held for those who went before them. So, really that includes, many wars, but especially starting with World War II, Korea, and then Vietnam War. So my question, I guess, to start with, is both of you, each of you, have had incredibly long and high achieving careers that cover the course of decades, essentially a historical epoch in which we've seen quite a lot of changes in the world, in America, and also in our own in the SOF community. So I think what I'd like to hear, and I think others would like to hear, is just a little bit of your perspective. So maybe Tom, I'll let you start, but I would like to hear. Tell us a little bit about your career, maybe some of the lessons learned, some of the perspectives that you've acquired over the years. What are some of the things that you would like to say to maybe the more recent cohort of folks who are still active in SOF or more recently separated?
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to participate in this event. And let me go to the first part of your intro, and that's really the legacy piece. One of the things that strikes me is that we are all just passing through. We are caretakers during that period of time when we serve. We had people come before us that taught us, that coached us, that mentored us, that led by their example. We took the best from them. The occasional poor leader, we learned from them as well. And then during the course of our careers, we tried to improve. And hopefully along the way, we prepared the next cohort, because in time we'll be gone. And if we've done our job correctly, we have served honorably. And perhaps more importantly, we have prepared the next generation to carry on, to continue the mission once we hang up our uniforms. And at that, I would be interested to hear Admiral Olson's thoughts.
Thanks, and thank you for inviting me to participate. You all are on a very important mission. I'm honored to have been asked to be part of at least this segment of the journey. I'm especially proud to be on this with Command Sergeant Major Corbett. He and I go back about 30 years, and I've admired his service and his character with the highest possible regard. I'll echo what Tom said about his comments about legacy, and just add to that during my time, and I came into Special Operations community a few years after Tom did. My trips to Vietnam were as a Naval Academy midshipman, not as a SOF operator. So I came in just after Vietnam ended. But the special operations community didn't exist. We were service entities, usually tucked fairly far down the service chains. We were an afterthought in many of the things, struggling to maintain our size after Vietnam, which we failed to do. All of the special operations forces were reduced. Post-Vietnam, it was a tough time for the community, and struggled like that, I think, through most of the 70s and into the 80s. But the failure to rescue the hostages out of Tehran, Iran in 1980 changed how to think about SOF. And when Congress passed the legislation, it created a special operations community. It was good for all of us who served in the service special operations units. I think the law got it very right. I remember fondly, before that, when there was less structure and less bureaucracy, but I think the increased professionalism, the increased funding, the increased sort of attention at the senior levels that special operations got ultimately served us well. And so that was a big change, the change into this community of SOF, which didn't really exist before, into jointness of SOF, which was an afterthought, an after-market modification before. It wasn't sort of built into the community, and again, the professionalism of the force. But I think it's still all about the people. The beauty of SOF is the people. The capability resides in the people. And I would echo what Tom said about those of us just passing through, trying to make conditions better so that great people will continue to come in and serve, and then trying to leave them something solid enough to build on, because in my view they just keep getting better and better. And then the third thing I'll mention is the change in the technology. And I asked a French counterpart once how life had changed during his service. He said when he came in, he was always lost, and when he left, he was never lost. And so just the ability to navigate, the ability to communicate with satellites, the change in the types and capabilities of the weaponry, all of that changed what operators can do. And so I like that old adage of SOF that we don't equip the man, I'm sorry, we don't man the equipment. We equip the man or woman, and it's still all about the person, but giving that person a better set of kit has enhanced SOF's ability to work as a joint force, work as a network force in a very powerful way. Back to you,
Tom. If you think back to when you first signed up and served overseas in Vietnam through to today, what are some of the seminal, maybe and a question for each of you will be think through maybe and tell us a little bit about some of the seminal moments, experiences, whether that's specific missions or operations that went well or didn't go well, points in time that were important learning moments. And what were those lessons?
Well, Chris, I'll highlight two. The first was the bitter failure to rescue our hostages in Tehran. It was a very, very low point in my career, in my life. It was a national humiliation. We lost 8 of our Joint Task Force teammates. And if there was a silver lining, Admiral Olson alluded to it. It was instrumental in the creation of U.S. SOCOM. And through that, the SOF enterprise that we have today. And if you'd have asked me in April of 1980, would we ever have what we have today? It is just simply unimaginable. The capabilities that we have today, you can't find them anyplace else. And so much of that came out of the bitter failure of Eagle Claw. And for me, obviously, the second one is Somalia. It was designated Operation Gothic Serpent. Most people know it as Black Hawk Down. And most pundits and most uninformed folks know that as, or regard that as a failure. And if you know anything about the military, the mission that day was to go out there and capture two of ID's principal lieutenants. We had already captured his deputy. There were a couple of others that we were seeking, with the thought being that if we disassemble ID's network, he would have to surface, and eventually we would get him. That particular day, we did capture those two lieutenants, along with about 20, upwards of 20 of ID's other principal clan members. But we paid a terrible price. A very, very high price. But there were two tragedies in my mind that came out of that operation. The first, obviously, the loss of life. But the other tragedy in my mind is the consequences of our withdrawal. It was a political decision, and it sent, in my mind, and in the minds certainly of bin Laden, an unequivocal message that all you have to do is kill a few Americans and they will quit the fight. And I think that stigma stuck with us for a long, long time, to our great disadvantage. And I will leave it at that.
Yeah, I would agree again with Tom. The first special operation I would mention, though, of real consequence was the Israeli rescue of the hostages held at the Entebbe airport in 1976. And that when asked if the United States could do such a thing, the answer was such that President Carter directed the creation of forces that could do such a thing, because they didn't exist. And so the special mission units grew out of are traceable, at least in part, back to the successful raid at Entebbe. And then I'll echo what Tom said about Eagle Claw and Desert One, and everybody gave it their very best, but in the end, a combination of poor weather and insufficient planning and a force that was thrown together in probably more haphazard way than it ought to have been. At least that's what the official report reported. Led to the creation of SOCOM. I think Desert Storm was a very important, Desert Shield and Desert Storm were very important to our community. It was kind of a coming out of SOF in a much more positive way. It was the first mission that SOCOM, after SOCOM was created, deployed forces to in a meaningful way, and the performance of all services in Desert Shield and Desert Storm was admirable, and I think it caught the attention of some senior leaders that there was a force that they could count on to do things different, do things first, do things cleverly, do things courageously, do things behind lines that just wasn't on their scope before. I don't need to say anything more about Mogadishu. Tommy and I were in the streets there together, and I'll say if there was a silver lining to that, and it's hard to find one, but if there was one, it was that people said, well, If you didn't have enough, what more do you need? And there was the inquiries into why that didn't go better than it did. And by the way, as Tom said, it wasn't a defeat in the streets at all. The mission was accomplished, and despite the tragic casualties that were taken, the tactical fight was won clearly by our side. But the strategic fight, the political fight, was not. And then I think there were so many missions post 9/11, but now that it's more than 11 years ago, the Bin Laden raid sort of pulled SOF. It had been pulled out of the shadows, slowly for quite a while, but that's showing a real spotlight on it. My own sense is and that was, and I highlight that because I don't think that that's all positive. I think the mission was a very good outcome, but I do think that this 15 minutes of fame is going to last 15 years too long, and I think that people now think of SOF as solely as this high-end kinetic direct action force, when it is so much more than that. But over the last several years, it's been all the books and the movies are about the high-end kinetic force. Nobody writes about what 90% of SOF is doing 90% of the time. You're on mute, Chris.
Eric, could you speak to that, please? Tell us about that 90% that we are not fully appreciating as a nation?
Well, I think if the Special Operations Command commander was here, he would tell you that SOF is waking up today in something like 75 countries around the world. They're in combat or near combat in 2 or 3 of those, and the rest of them, they're making a difference in really powerful ways. They're delaying or preventing conflict. They're mitigating friction that could lead to conflict. They are gaining awareness of the context of conflict. They are training and being trained by. They are training and learning from their counterparts around the world, and the fact that it's not people shooting at each other doesn't mean that it's not a very, very important SOF mission that's being done.
Tom, you've played an important role supporting SOF over the last 20 years since you retired from the military, since you retired from the U.S. Army. So you've I don't want to say you've had a front row seat even after your retirement, but you kind of have. What have you seen, and what are some of your thoughts on the SOF role and mission during the global war on terror, last 20 years?
I guess one of the things, and I alluded to it earlier, was just the tremendous expansion of capabilities, and it's not just been within SOF. I mean, you look at the conventional forces today, what they're wearing, so much of how they operate, albeit during the recent conflicts, but the gear they're wearing, some of their TTP, that came out of SOF. Just an absolutely astounding growth in capabilities, and some growth in capacity as well, that we transferred to the conventional forces. With regard to my post-retirement or post-military retirement employment, I was very fortunate to serve the SOF community, the SOF enterprise really, and the intelligence community to a bit lesser extent. And sort of ironically, for a retired Army SOF guy, a very good part of the work that I did as a defense contractor was in support of naval special warfare. I had an association with them that extended across several projects. A little bit later, we'll get a chance to see or hear Rob Newsom. I got a chance to meet him and do something for him. And a couple of his folks subsequently was involved in an effort that had to do with, well, let's just say it was intelligence related capabilities within NSW. And I mean, it was exciting work. It was purposeful work. It really made me feel like, although I was out of uniform, I was still in the game, and made some great new friends, and would like to think that in my very small way, I contributed to where we are today as a community and as an awesome SOF enterprise.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have like about 2 minutes left. And so I wish we had 4 more hours for this conversation. And I have so many questions, but that won't happen today. Could I ask each of you, just give each of you the chance, you got like 1 minute. What would you like to say to the community? What perspective would you like to share back to the community that you haven't had a chance to say yet?
All right, Tom, I'll go first on this one. I would just say that, the future of SOF is good as long as it stays soft, meaning that, the beauty of SOF is that it's not conventional. It dares to be different. It tends to understand the operational context of a fight much more. It tends to be educated as well as skillful. It and it tends to be less hierarchical, and it pushes tactical decisions, sometimes with strategic consequences, but it pushes tactical decisions down to the lowest level, sometimes to the guy whose finger is on a trigger making a decision about whether or not to take a shot. And I think as long as SOF doesn't sort of lose its soul, it keeps reminding itself why it was created, what it is, what it offers the nation that is not in support of, but what is unlike what the conventional services offer. It's in good shape.
Tom?
Chris, for my part, I guess what I'd like to say is thanks to the current generation. I can't speak for all of my generation, although the sentiment I'm going to express, I think, is widely held across my generation. And that's that we have the deepest admiration and respect for the post 9/11 generation, for their commitment, for their dedication, and for the resilience. They've been at war for 20 years. For so many of them, that's been virtually their entire career. And whereas some of us, had as I characterized you the other day, sort of periodic episodes of high adventure. They were spread across, in my case, 30 years. Whereas the generation today is back to back deployments. And so thanks to them for their service, and to the spouses. Thank you for your service, for your love, for your support, for your understanding. You're every bit as much part of our team as those guys that put on the uniforms, and gals that put on the uniforms. So thanks to all for continuing the mission.
Yeah.
Thank you. Fran, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Chris. And thank you, Admiral Olson. Thanks, Sergeant Major Corbett. I appreciate it very much. Your perspectives, and honestly, some of the some of the most interesting perspectives on some of the most defining operations that have shaped our community. I think we just heard your perspectives there, and that was truly amazing. So thank you for that. So we're going to take a break now. We're going to transition over to the health sprints. So as I said earlier, these are going to be the interactive conversations, and they're also going to take place in a separate Zoom meeting. So if everybody scrolls down on the website that has all of the information for tonight's event, you're going to go to a section that says Health Sprint Zoom button. Click on that. It'll switch you over there. Everybody on the panels need to go over there as well, and we'll see you in there in a second. Link. We're going to conclude the evening with a recap session that's going to bring everybody together from both our panels and our keynote speakers from the beginning. And then after that, we're going to have some closing remarks from Kaylee Lehman from the Military Special Operations Family Collective. Dr. Chris Frueh is going to pick this up. He's going to moderate the final session. So Chris, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Fran. Well, we have just a few minutes left. And I think what we would like to do with this last half hour is talk about takeaways, key takeaways, maybe some questions that are still lingering in people's minds, and then maybe close out with a little bit of discussion about the next conversation or future conversations and where those should go and what those should be about. So I want to give our two keynotes an opportunity. So Eric, if you're good with this, I think I'll let you start. And the question that I'll put to you is, and you can take this in a variety of ways, but maybe what are some key takeaways or a key takeaway that you have formulated over the last hour and a half? And, or if you would like, you're welcome to ask a question of any of the other panelists here.
Yeah, thank you. Those were two very powerful sessions. This is my first time in this forum, and but not my last. This is really useful and helpful. And my big takeaway is that teammates are always teammates, and the community is much bigger and growing. Bigger than we believe it was, and still growing to include so many dedicated experts who care so much about this community and the future. And I want to thank everybody who's part of this, some of whom have suffered their own tragedies, for staying focused on this as important to SOF's present and future being. I think I don't really have a question. I would say that sort of an observation is that we are never not teammates, and that in service we have to continue to plan for life after service. Most are likely to live a long time after their service in SOF, and how they think about who they will be and what they will be and how they will continue to contribute, how they will continue to be teammates in all of their teams and tribes, and how they will know how and when to seek help. Is I think just becoming more and more important. And with that, I'll pass it back to you.
Tom.
I think that the thing that I'm struck by, and I guess I'll go back to Admiral Olson's vision and POTUF is maybe, if not the very start, certainly a very important catalytic event. But in my mind, probably the start in terms of some sort of an enterprise-wide commitment to the health and welfare of the community. And I guess for a good part of my career and certainly my post-military career, I've sort of been head down and was not really aware of all of the things that folks associated with the community or folks that were members of the community that have gotten into these programs or started programs. And it is heartening to see how either folks from within the community that have brought professionals in or professionals that became interested or were recruited have joined into something that is really a very, very remarkable and heartwarming collaborative enterprise that looks to address the health and welfare of our community. And it's something that now that I am fully retired, as of the 31st of August, this is the sort of thing that I would like to become more involved in because I need a sense of purpose. I need something that's going to get me up every morning, that's going to excite me. And my military service and post-military work, it provided that. But as we've heard people refer during the course of this event, I mean, we all need that something that we can attach to that gives us a sense or a connection to something that is greater than who we are as individuals. And I think these sorts of endeavors, they're just phenomenal. I mean, they just absolutely are. And to all of you that are contributing, to all of you that are participating and offering your comments, thanks so very much. You know, for folks that, you know, give so much to our country, that we're able to give back to them. And even though I feel a connection to them, I mean, they're the current generation. God bless you for the things that you're doing for our community. I commend you for what you do. I'm thankful for your efforts. And if there's ever anything that I can do to assist, I'm all in.
Thank you. I think that helps me segue over maybe to look at Preston for your comment, takeaways, thoughts.
I wonder if I can cheat just a little bit and see if I can tee up a question for Admiral Olson if he's up for it. And you can decline, sort of. I'll paint the picture, and if you decline, I'll take it from there. But here's one of the things that always fascinates me is that you were a key leader at a super interesting time, historic time in the country's history. And you had to be living a life where at times you were part of significant history-making conversations and then having to transition to go get groceries or pump gas or take out the garbage. And I think these kinds of transitions, going from these monumental conversations or taking place like Mogadishu, other things, and then the sort of normal everyday stuff and that gear change. And over the years, you've had to probably have made that gear change a lot of times. And for those like me who study that, or people that are doing that for real, if you were to look at somebody at the front end of a career that maybe like yours and said, here are some things you might want to think about making those transitions, do you have any general advice? You're on mute, sir.
Thank you. I mean, first of all, I never avoid answering a question, so thanks for asking. I just take a slightly different take on it. For me, I don't think it was a bunch of stops and starts or shifting gears. I think that that it was always about the missions I was on, and those missions were, sometimes simultaneous and sometimes quite different from each other. So sometimes my mission was to look after my family, and sometimes my mission was to do what operators do. And so for me, it was less a balance of stops and starts and gear shifts as trying to evaluate the distinction at that moment between what was more urgent and what was more important. And some things are always of utmost important, but you have to pay more attention at that moment to what's urgent. And sometimes you can sort of get back to what's more important, but I think that's a sliding scale of importance and urgency. And as long as you're focused on the mission and you can balance that scale, I think that's, for me anyway, that's kind of what helped.
It's a super, super helpful answer. Thank you. And it ties into what CSM Corbett was saying about his transition and looking for mission and purpose. And what I often say is, at any given time, what is an individual in service to in that particular moment? What is their mission? What are they getting after? And if the answer is, I don't know, that's a bit problematic for teammates. And so getting them refocused on that's really important.
And I'll just pile on myself here, which is you also have to learn to trust. And we naturally learn to trust our teammates in an operational environment, but sometimes trusting others around us is a little more difficult. And in my case, I know I absolutely trusted members of my family and my extended circle of friends and sort of cohorts who weren't on my, weren't on my specific team. Where sometimes being able to give that trust is the hardest thing.
Chris, I have nothing more eloquent to say than that, so I'm going to go ahead and pass off.
Beautiful, beautiful. Chelsea, let me hit you up next. Key takeaways, thoughts, questions.
Key takeaways. You know your body better than anybody else. So if something's not right, and it's present for 2 weeks, 2 or more weeks, then speak up, talk to your doctor, and one thing I can say, because I am a provider, is do not hold them on a pedestal. If they say, oh, you're fine, it's fine. You know your body better than anybody else. Seek a second opinion, reach out. I'm still answering questions right now. It's been 12 hours. So people constantly, how can I do this? Should I be worried about this? Reach out. Talk to a teammate, talk to Rob, it's a lived experience. So it's one of those things, you only have one life and you survived a lot worse things in your lifetime. So, just take control of your health and be your own best advocate. So that's my biggest key takeaway is be your own best advocate, speak up if something's not right.
Amanda, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the kind of the resounding theme for me is the concept of community and tribe, whether that be amongst the SOF community, or if you are facing a cancer diagnosis or concerned about that, or you're a survivor, is just finding the right resources and people to help guide you through that. I think there's a positive note here, even though the statistics are staggeringly high. For cancer diagnoses, it's the advancements have never been so rapid and so available to a patient to be able to access better care. There's a lot of options out there, and I think if what we're working with is trying to navigate what options amongst so many, it's a positive place to be compared to 10 years ago. And there's definitely a community of advocates and people that are really passionate about helping patients access this that are out there. So that would be, my reflection. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and learn more about what's happening amongst the SOF community.
Rob, I guess the same question to you, but with one little additional twist on it, which is, what are we missing? What have we not talked about today? I mean, we've not talked about many things, but what have we missed today that we need to be more mindful of in future conversations?
I think part of it is what now, right? And we started this conversation last December when SOCOM Surgeon's Office sponsored a cancer and SOF symposium and let people ruminate on it for a long time. But my takeaway from the history of toxic exposure and what we need to do is that there's 3 buckets of cohorts, I think. The first is active duty folks, and Special Operations Command and Defense Health Agency are going to figure out what to do, and they're going to drive something. Their problem is they're in the bureaucracy, and so there's tons of agencies and staff officers with a bucket full of no's to get in their way when they try to be creative. The second cohort is the SOF veteran community. We have much more flexibility, but less structure to get after the problem. And I think what we need to do is conduct a swarm on this, where a bunch of small entities attack the problem from different angles through great coordination and a sense of purpose on the mission. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in December. And then the third cohort is, God help them, the conventional forces. They don't have 43 plus different SOF veteran service organizations that are raising money, that are advocating for them, that are providing additional support. And so I think it's incumbent upon the SOF community to do what we've always done and break trail for conventional forces as we discover a way to attack this with better education and awareness, with more research, with precision medicine. We need to get on step to transfer that to the broader conventional forces, both active duty and the veterans community.
Fran, I saved you for last. I know you thought as an MC you didn't have to say or think anything too deeply, but we're going to put you on the spot.
I guess so.
Takeaways. I mean, I know you're a pretty face, but I think there's some thoughts. There's some deep thoughts percolating in there.
When I reflect on this conversation, one of the biggest things that I think about is action. And everything requires us in special operations, we're action oriented. I think one of the biggest things that we hear from transitioning veterans is, I'm results oriented. I want to do something that most people don't want to do. I have to constantly change my environment. I'm going to be bored if I take a desk job and sit here and type on a computer all day. Everything we talked about today is about taking action. And I think that started in the beginning with the keynote. And we talked about some of the defining actions that were taken by a number of our leaders throughout history to define what special operations is today. And then as we look at the health sprints, we talk about how do we actually, take a minute to look internally and think about how are we feeling? I mean, we as special operators, although we are accustomed to taking action and making decisions very quickly. When it comes to our own personal well-being, that is where we tend to hit the brakes and stop and not want to do anything and think that we're going to be okay. And, to Preston's comments about, we've got to understand ourselves, and our own behavior, first. We tend to not do that as special operators. And so, if we want to build a force that is going to persevere for the future and both, and we discussed that in the first keynote, what's our biggest job as leaders? It's to develop the next generation behind us. And I think, we've done a very effective job of that, but we got to make sure that we take care of people first. And the best way that we take care of people first is to look internally, make sure that we feel good, that we are operating at our highest capacity, and then invest in those people in that soft truth number one behind us. And so I think we have a lot of work to do around this as a community, but it starts with organizations like this and conversations like this, because we can't take action if we don't first understand ourselves. So that's my thoughts, Chris.
Thank you. That's excellent. So I guess we're almost out of time, but I think we have 5 minutes for one more one more thing that I'll put out here. And this is, we have a lot of viewers. We have listeners. We have folks that may be tuning into this at a later time via recording. What would you guys like to say to the audience? What can our viewers, what can our audience do to support or take action on the things we've talked about today? How can people help the community? What can be done? Anyone want to field that question?
Well, I think there's two things as it relates to cancer and SOF. One is that Kalia asked me to chair the cancer task force within the collaborative, and right now that exists of me. So if you're interested, if you're passionate and want to join the task force to get after this, then reach out to Kalia and company and get on the task force. And the second one is, every one of us comes from a tribe, and my tribe, the SEAL community, has 7 or 8 separate VSOs that support us. And I have been beating down their doors to pay attention to cancer, to support with advocacy and education. And each one is doing something. Everyone can do something more. So my recommendation for SOF veterans is to go to your VSO in the Green Beret community, in the Ranger community, in the Raider community, in the aviation community, and ask them to get involved and be more involved, because I think they're a huge part of the answer.
I'll join you on that committee. I'll volunteer for that committee that you're leading.
Chris, I'll jump in. I would just amplify what Admiral Olson was just saying, which is, as I look at the communities from day one, everyone is being evaluated and evaluating others on levels of trust and competence. If you want to be part of this community, you'd better have high levels of trust and competence. And as you leave the communities, and I don't mean leave the communities as in you leave the brotherhood, but you go into the ordinary world, one of the questions you need to start asking yourself is, how do you create trust in others? How does others gain trust in you? And how do you evaluate competence? And if you hold everyone to the standards of your former community, you're going to be really lonely. And so you've got to figure out the ways to go the extra effort to find out ways to trust people without feeling like you're betraying your values. So I'll pause there, and I want to say that, so if I screwed anything up, Admiral Olson could correct it.
I don't have anything to correct. I just extend what Rob said, as, and not to diminish the importance of what any individual is doing or what any organization is doing. But as Rob highlighted, there are so many opportunities to support in so many ways. Now, maybe you're more interested in spouse abuse than in cancer. Maybe you're more interested in suicide than in cancer. Maybe whatever it is has captured you because of some life experience. There's an organization that you can support that is focused on that. And so I would just urge and I think nobody would be signed into this if they weren't already interested in this. So I'd say just spread the word. There are so many ways that each of us can help in some way, and so many people who are so grateful to receive whatever help they get. That I just urge everybody to do something.
So in concluding, before I pass the baton over to Fran and Kaylee, I'll add my own thought to this, which is I've been talking and working and consulting with operators going on 10 years now. And for the longest time, I didn't know what the other resources out there were. So I had trouble connecting individuals to programs, to foundations, to services. And a lot of it was do it yourself, figure it out yourself. And one of the things that's really been heartening for me in what I've seen is the coming together that the community is starting to do now, and the small foundations that are connecting with each other and becoming larger groups. I know that several of you who have your own foundations or leaders within one foundation are now joining boards of other foundations. And we have the Military Special Operation Family Collaborative. And the collaborative has been such a powerful opportunity for different groups, but with the same mission, the same goal, to come together, to work together. So I want to express that appreciation to everybody, that it now feels like that we're rowing together, in a way we weren't 5 years ago. So I'm not sure, do I hand this over to Fran or to Kaylee? Who gets it next?
I'm just going to pass it right over to Kaylee, Chris. So appreciate you leading this conversation, and very sincere thank you to all of our speakers, all of our panelists, and everybody who joined in to partake in this conversation tonight. We said in the beginning that the goal is to take something away concrete that you could put to use, right as soon as you hit end on this thing. And I think that we achieved that in many different ways, and encourage everybody to join the deep dives that are coming up. I know we put them in the chat, and the team will be pushing out more correspondence on those over the course of the next couple of weeks. But truly an honor to be here. From my perspective, I very much enjoy these conversations and the opportunity to sit with everybody. And I'm going to turn it over to Kaylee.
Thanks, Fran. I appreciate it. Thank you for emceeing tonight and being our guide throughout this event. Admiral Olson and CSM Corbett, I couldn't be more honored than that you guys would join our team room tonight. Your history, your legacy just had me reflecting so long. It was the highlight of the month, and frankly this year, looking back over the preparation for these team rooms, started a year ago now. Rob, Preston, Chelsea, Amanda, thank you for joining us tonight, leading our sprints. Each of these sprints are brought on by feedback from subcomponents, from viewers, from feedback we get from advisory boards. We try to cover the topics where people are looking for resources, looking for guides, and we find the people doing it best and try to connect them along with our partner in doing this event, Global SOF Foundation. We couldn't put the team room on without them, and we're proud to co-host this with them and connect the community and all the organizations and the efforts doing the hard work to try to close the gaps. We're strongest when we come together, and on behalf of Military Special Operations Family Collaborative, we're driven to add certainty to the journey for everyone. So we look for who's doing the best and take joy in elevating what they're doing. So thank you for joining us tonight. We would appreciate all of your feedback. If you would like to join us for our deep dive on cancer and SOF, or join our task force, which will be looking at creating all of the moving pieces together and helping connect the dots and not leave people in the dark. That will be the primary focus of our task force, is being a connector of all the things going on so that we can move together more briskly. And reach out to us on our home webpage, or simply fill in that you would like to be connected to that through the feedback form that was dropped in the chat. Or you can find on any of the pages. We'll be sending out a blog and replays for this event. And as we look at 2023, we would love to hear, what do you want to hear more of? What would you like to get more specific on? Who do you want to hear from? And how can we best serve SOF as we move forward together? So with that, I will not hold anyone up any further. And I wish you all a great night, a very happy Thanksgiving and holiday season. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Admiral.
Thanks, Kaylee.
Thank you. Thank you, CSM.